Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Dr. Cammy and Karen Go Keto, where Dr. Cammy and I are in the process of transitioning our life from a standard American diet to a ketogenic, carnivore, ketovore lifestyle. And today we're with Mike Collins, the sugar-free man, who is all about getting the sugar, which is the first step, I think, to a carnivore and keto lifestyle. And it's certainly the ongoing step of the lifestyle. So, uh, Dr. Cammy and Mike have been talking about some various things before we started filming. So, Mike, why don't you tell us where we're at?
Well, Dr. Cammy was describing a dual life, the life of an addict of any kind of addiction, but sugar for sure. And I think this would be included, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the eating in secret stuff and the not eating in a public restaurants. And, the people are like, oh, I don't really eat that stuff or something. And then they're at home and they're like eating a lot. And you were referring it back to your drinking days. So tell them that story. It was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, or like even being in a store buying junk and like wondering like is my neighbor going to be by or is somebody going to see me buying these things? Going through the drive-through was safer and then eating it at home by yourself. Oh, yes. So I was talking to Mike about how when I used to drink, I would have two lives where I had my work life where I would never go to work drunk or even hungover because of the responsibility I had as a doctor and a surgeon, and I just wouldn't do that. But toward the very end of my drinking on Fridays, I did not have to take my two small children anywhere because they went to preschool on Monday through Thursdays. And on Fridays, I could be home alone with my kids. I was post call, so I had been up usually most of the night before. But that's when I would drink, and I would be sure I had wine at home or things to drink that I could start drinking. It was so the way that I felt was that throughout the week, frustrations would happen, things would happen that upset me. I would have feelings that I kind of didn't process very well or that felt unacceptable to me. And I would store them up in this neat little box. And then on Fridays, I would open the box and just kind of drink it all away. And I would be walking around the neighborhood with my mandarin orange vodka inside my soda can, talking to the neighbors. And so that's kind of how I feel when I'm eating too. I have these two lives. And when I get mad, like happened the other day, if we want to talk about that binge I went after I weighed in, get really, really mad and really upset. And then I check out of my healthy life and I have certain thoughts and actions and behaviors that all go together to support this unhealthy binge eating, high carb, ultra processed food situation that I get myself into. And then I have this other life, which I'm spending more time in and feeling more comfortable in, which I'm very pleased, which is this other life where I'm eating really healthy. I'm on my carnivore diet. I'm watching my carbohydrates. When I eat, I feel good. I have energy. I'm focused and I'm starting to learn how to enjoy food. I'm eating sardines and starting to learn how to actually enjoy them. Not so much because when I eat them, they're delicious and wonderful. I'm trying to get to that point, but how I feel about 20 minutes after I eat them, I just feel like Wonder Woman and I just, you know, am focused and have energy and I'm not hungry and I'm not full. So, being in that place where I have thoughts and actions and behavior that make me feel so successful. And so working toward peak performance and working toward like my true self and being in that situation. And so, you know, uh, I can see myself as my goal is to get more and more there so that really I don't have these times where I spend in this other binge ultra processed situation.
Yeah, like I said, as I introduced it's really there's this genuine double life that most addicts have of sneaking. And I think we've been talking about this on the Tuesday, Wednesday meetings. I do believe that there is a dopamine response to sneaking. It's a getting away with what your parents didn't want you to do, whatever. It's very old and very, from your childhood kind of thing. It's getting away with stuff that you want to do. So you're taking care of, you feel like you're taking care of yourself, but actually you're getting the substances in and whatever. So this kind of dual life, double life is very common. We were talking, like I said, it's the illusion of that you're controlling it, that it's, no problem. It doesn't, or you deserve it is probably the most common You deserve it. You worked 4 days hard and you deserve it, this weekend chill or whatever. So I don't, and one of the, oh, I was going to do is a major reframe to the positive, right? Is that like you're aware of it now, and you lived through it one other time with another substance. And I think that there is this, well, what I was going to say is what one of my sponsors said, there's a grading time between awareness and willingness, which I always thought was one of the best quotes I ever heard. You're aware, but your willingness is not quite up to your awareness, And like for you, like this, there are movements into like eliminating the secrecy, eliminating the sneakiness. You're aware. And just that you're verbalizing it out loud on freaking YouTube, for goodness, you know what I mean, in the podcast. And I always like that you're telling on yourself, you're making connections with other people and explaining stuff that there's a cognitive dissonance in. Like you're like, what the hell? Like, what am I doing? Right. And then you're trying to excise it by like talking about it right now. So I think of it as a real big positive, and I think that you're just in that grading time. You're getting there, and that it will fade away eventually if you keep doing all the basics. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't stress about it too much and cut yourself. One of the things that addicts never do is cut themselves some slack or cut themselves a break. They just never do. They're just too hard on themselves.
Amen. And not giving yourself credit where credit is due. Like I'll have a great day and I'll eat right and, I'll make all the right choices. And then I'll think, well, yeah, that's just what you're supposed to do is make all the right choices, where it's like, hey, I walked down that aisle. I looked at that food. I had a thought. I said no, and I walked away. I mean, that you have to make bigger deals out of those things because they build upon one another.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so funny because this is a business construct. It's he called it the gap in the gain, which is there's a huge difference between, and it would fall into the grading time between awareness and wellness. And so you're looking where you want to be, right size body, never think about it, totally gone like the alcohol is, right? And the vision of that world, of that person, of that life is, think of it as the horizon. It's so far into the horizon. And what you don't do is exactly what you just said, which is like mark milestones of positivity as you reach them, weight goals or, week free of binge goals, and, celebrate with non-food kind of things. Because you're never genuinely, even there's no perfection, and you're never going to, if you're on a hike, you're never going to reach the horizon. It's just never going to happen. But when you're trying to get there, trying to visualize, trying to get to that goal, you're always trying to strive for it. And if you don't stop and do exactly what you just said, which is reward yourself for the positive things you have done, you don't build a system of self-esteem. You know what I mean? You don't build a system of accomplishment by looking back at the good stuff, right? We're always looking forward to that horizon. We never get there. Because when you get to the horizon, you're going to want to change some other health thing, and even if you're what you would consider fantasy perfect, then you're going to be starting over because there'd be another horizon you're trying to get to. So yeah, cut yourself a little break. You're doing great.
Thank you. Thank you. And the other thing is I think that coaching can really help in the situation too, because when you're with a coach, like I think when you go through your 30-day challenge, it's, your sugar detox challenge. That's online, by the way. You go to Mike Collins 30-day detox challenge. And I think having a coach through that process would be really helpful because a coach will just verbally say, you need to give yourself credit for that decision you made right there and kind of help you understand that, yes, I do. It's not something that you say, well, that's no big deal, because it is a big deal and you need to build on those positives.
Well, also it's tied to the sneaking thing. Like you're not going to tell anybody else that you've been sneaking. Like you're going to go to the restaurant and, have a salad and 2 tomatoes, It's like you're not going to tell anybody else, but if you're ready and willing, you can tell a coach who's already been there and done the work themselves. They're not going to judge you in any way. So it's like an outlet for it's like an end, if you will, to your sneaking. It'll help you end your sneaking. So yeah, that's a great.
Karen, did you want to? I saw you writing some notes. Did you want to say something or ask us a question?
Did you talk about the eating after the check-in with Jeff? I mean, what was that? You mentioned that, but I didn't.
No, we didn't talk about that. So I checked in with Jeff before I went to Hawaii with my girlfriend. And I lost 5.5 pounds, but I gained percent body fat, like significantly. And the reason why that happened was because I had lost a lot of water weight. And so the percent body fat had gone up. And when I saw the graph, I got really mad, really, really mad. I was angry. I was like, how do I lose 5.5 pounds and gain body fat? And so this was over a 2-week period. So 5.5 pounds on my big frame is not a lot of weight, but it was like, it was significant to me, weight loss. And I was really, really mad. And then on top of that, I knew that I was going to be with Diane for a week in Hawaii. And this is where the sneaking comes in, right? Because I knew if I'm one-on-one with somebody like the whole time, like it's going to be hard to sneak food, right? And I really was in the mindset that I was going to be able to be successful in going to Hawaii with her because she eats carnivore. And so we generally eat together the same foods. And it did turn out to be a really, relatively easy trip to do really well. And so I had in my mind, shoot, I'm going to go be with Diane for a week. I'm going to have to eat perfect. I'm really, really mad. And this set forth a binge of 2 days, eating ultra processed carby food and getting into that realm where I feel so bad about myself and I make bad choices and I have bad thoughts and bad behavior. And so that was however long ago. That was 2 weeks ago, right? Because now I'm going today to weigh in with Jeff.
So what was it that made you mad?
The fact that I had gained percent body fat.
Did you gain overall weight?
No.
I lost 5 pounds.
I lost over 5 pounds. I lost 5.5 pounds.
So
But that's what an addict will do. An addict will go, well, yeah, you lost 5.5 pounds, big deal because you gained percent body fat.
yeah, but what I'm saying is you didn't gain any body fat.
Right. But an addict, for me, I was looking for an excuse to binge because I already knew I was going to be with Diane for a week and be eating healthy.
So you said something earlier and you said my true self. And I think that could be an underlying issue that you have, that you think who you are is somebody other than who you are.
You mean like who I am now or like my
Ever,
idea of who my true self is?
You just referenced, well, my true self. I mean, who could that possibly be other than who you are? You mean, so if it's not your true self, this is your false self.
I guess. I mean, my true self, when I say my true self, I mean like my authentic self, like myself who is heading towards self-actualization and who is healthy and living at higher frequency and, doing the deal as far as eating healthy.
But so
and not drinking,
okay,
or not dealing with, not being active in any of my addictions.
But that sounds to me like that's not who you are.
Well, it's not who I am when I binge.
And my question to you is, why not?
I see what you're saying.
Why isn't that part of the process?
Of the healthy of the.
I mean, I would have to say, because I think that that's a silly concept, my true self. How can you be anything other than who you are?
I see what you're saying. Like in the moment, like now.
Like now. Like ever.
Right.
Right? Like, I mean, that just shatters your person into so many different things, because who you are to me and who you are to Mike and who you are to your children and who you are to your friends, your other friends, and who you are to other people is always a different perception from everybody's different, point of view. To say that you have another point of view of yourself and one is true, if one is true and you have separated it by saying my true self, then the other one must be false. And that's the one you're living in now because you're aiming for the truth.
So then it would just be like, then it would be the healthy version of my true self And then when I'm binging and doing that, I'm living in the unhealthy version of my true self.
Well, you're the one who's putting the labels on it.
Right.
So there's you who says something, and there's you who does something. And if what you say is one thing and that's what you want to live into, I want to drive the speed limit the rest of my life, and I get in my car and I go 80 miles an hour somewhere, I'm saying one thing and I'm doing something else. And I think Mike referred to that earlier as the illusion of, that's an illusion there, or a delusion in this case. So you can either get rid of the rule, I drive the speed limit, and then drive whatever you want, which could be the speed limit or not the speed limit. Or you can stick by your word and do what you say you're going to do, or say what you're doing. Do what you're saying. So when you get into your car, you're the one who chooses to drive the speed limit or to drive 80 or 180 miles an hour.
Okay, so are you bringing this up because it has to do with what you say you're doing, like being true to your word?
Well, I'm bringing it up because you said that there's a true self, and I want to know this other person, I think, that you think is not your true self, your false self, is the one that gets to do all kinds of stuff because it's not responsible to its true self, or gets to be beat upon by yourself in any number of ways, judged by yourself, and found wanting.
I think there's a term that could be added here, which is your ideal self as opposed to true. And I think that we all kind of have this idea of our true, or there you go again, our ideal self. And in order to survive as young people, if we develop addictive habits, we had to develop a persona, or, one that was not our true self, and please other people and do different things that was going against our ideal self or our true self, but it never really, it served us then and doesn't serve us now. It's helped us survive, but it doesn't serve us now. And the whole trite saying of, the journey is inward, which is really discovering who that true self is. And that's the ideal self there. And continuing to peel back the layers of the onion to find it, because society, family, raising, whatever, gives we end up, and most people die never really having the courage, which is weird word to add to this, to do that work to delve into who that ideal or true self is. And I would agree with you that, but I think it's an egoic look at it. In other words, and this is an egoic kind of, and the rational recovery is based on this. And, Dr. Glenn's work and Brain Over Binge is based on this rational recovery stuff, that you can just say, bad self, stop doing it and become the person you want to be. But I just don't believe that's possible. I don't believe it's true. And I don't believe in rational recovery or any of those systems, because, this kind of idea that ego is, in my opinion, a drug that we, like a process addiction, that we use as a defense mechanism to help us avoid feelings, right? Like workaholism, right? It's like, so, I mean, it's a tough situation, a tough question, and a tough place where you're trying to delve into becoming yourself. And most people are afraid of the journey, basically.
But see, Mike, that's what I don't like hearing, is afraid of becoming yourself. That is the ego right there, because yourself is the ego. You are becoming, if you're in the process of becoming, and that's all that you're aware of, it's not to say that your body doesn't change, or that your humanness doesn't change. It does change. And we do have control over certain aspects of it, right? If I want to raise my arm, I get to raise my arm. I'll tell you, if I asked my mom if she wanted to raise her arm, she can't raise her arm. She can't do it. So,
Even if she wants to.
right, as I said, if she wants to, she can't do it. Doesn't change her as a human being. She's still a wonderful, loving human being. And that I think my mom has shown me in these few years that she's had her episodes and afflictions. We don't want her to not be able to walk. But the fact that she can't walk doesn't mean that she's not her true self. and doesn't mean she has to become anything different other than who she is, right? Is a completely different thing. So when you say in the person that you're becoming, it's as though you're attaching to the result as opposed to being with. I think it's sort of like the calories in, calories out. It might work for some people, but that's probably just luck. You know what I mean? Luck and maybe perseverance. But who Cammy is a person who eats carbs. Or today, right now, she's somebody right now not eating carbs. We see nothing going into her mouth, right? The present moment, present moment. Oh, look, a new present moment, and now she's not eating carbs. That's who she is. So to say, for her to think that she's somebody other than somebody who eats carbs is silly until she goes through the drive-through and grabs some carbs and puts them in her mouth. Now she's a person who eats carbs. And to say that she's one of those people but not the other person is, I think, detrimental to her development to reach her goals. Just like when she wanted to go to med school, right? All those choices that she made to not watch sports and to go to the library, those are the choices. She was a person who was going to succeed in med school and not succeed in med school. So because we are rational human beings, there are things that we can do. And Cammy, I would ask you to look at and journal. Was it really, because you had a lot of in your telling of it, you were really mad, you used the word really mad, angry about something that didn't even occur because you thought, it sounded like you're telling a story that you got fatter and you didn't.
Right. Well, that's the addict in me finding the
No,
reason
I don't want to hear about you saying the addict in you. That's just who you are. That's who you were at that point that said, and so I don't know if it's true or not. Or is it that you wanted some excuse because you really want to eat carbs? You really want to eat carbs no matter what else, and you'll find any excuse. And so the excuse is, since I know I'm going to be good when I'm in Hawaii, this time now I have this trigger. It's always going to be something. It's always
Right.
So what you've done is that box that you created before where you used to say, I'm going to put off all of the things that have happened today and I'm going to look at them on Friday when I can have a drink. It's now, I want to have carbs so bad, so bad. I really want to have carbs. And so the issue is, how do you change the wanting of the carbs? And I know Mike can say, hey, it's a strong dopamine thing. I get that. But look, she's not eating them right now. She could be, but she's not. So it's not that strong. And when you think it's somebody else who's going to eat the carbs, oh, bad Cammy or size 8 Cammy is going to do one thing and bad Cammy is going to do another thing. I think it confuses you and it makes it hard. It makes your choice, like the choice for you. If the thing with Jeff, if you binge 90% of the time after you check in with Jeff, Doc, it hurts when I do this. Don't check in with Jeff, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, for me, it feels like a reprogramming of the soul.
Well, but how do you reprogram it is what I'm saying. If checking in with Jeff.
That's what we're trying to figure out. That's what we're working on.
But isn't it so that if the trigger is checking in with Jeff, and maybe you say, oh, but he doesn't do it. It doesn't all the time.
Well, one of the things that checking in with Jeff does is create a reality for me. And that gives me, measurements and parameters to look at what is really going on. And for the most part, I have to say, when I go and see Jeff, it's a very positive experience.
Okay, I would disagree. I would say track and see how many times after you visit Jeff you binge.
Okay.
Because you say that it's a positive thing. Getting numbers, it may help. It may make a dopamine rush in your head that you've got numbers. That may be true. You may look at that as being positive, like you're looking at it, oh, well, I've measured this, and therefore I can manage it. No, you don't have to measure it to manage it. You can see, look, if I check in with Jeff, there's a trigger there, right? Just like, what if in your past you didn't have that Friday free time? What if you had to work another day? What if somebody said, oh, you know what, you got to work on Friday too? Now all of a sudden things would be different, right? You'd have to rearrange everything. And what I'm saying is look at if 90% of the time, 50, whatever number is workable for you that says, oh, look, I do binge every time after I check in with Jeff. Well, if your goal is to stop binging, okay, so here's the thing. If your physical goal is to stop binging, stop doing the trigger. If your goal is to get a lot of information about yourself, then do it. But I'm saying the information that I'm getting from you is, I go to Jeff and get all these numbers, and those numbers make me binge. So there's something there that you're not looking at, and maybe my thought is not accurate because there's something behind what you're saying or what you're not saying that leads to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you got to it. I 100% agree that if it is a trigger, if there is a trigger in those visits for whatever reason, like the thing that happened when there was a trigger when she visited her mother, like I definitely think that's part of it. But at the beginning, you're implying that she has more control over it than she actually does. All addicts know what they want and where they want to be as far as health and behavioral change. It's that getting to that process that's the hard part, which is really what we're doing here is the work. But the idea that you can snap your fingers, flip a switch and just stop that's another illusion. It's not possible. I mean, it is possible.
It is possible. It's not an illusion.
Well,
No, but
the problem is right there. You believe that.
What?
You believe, but it's not true.
It is true.
It's just not. No, it isn't.
Not for an addict.
It is so true.
No, it's
yes, it is. Because Cammy, if I said to you,
Not for a true addict.
it is. And because if I said to you, there's two choices, okay? I'm going to kidnap Michael and kill him if you eat sugar ever again. So tell me, if I did that, are you saying you would eat sugar?
I might end up eating sugar over that.
I disagree.
Because do you know the first thought I had?
Yeah.
I've already lost 2 kids. I know how to lose kids.
All right. If I say, see here, okay, so maybe that's what it is.
That's the first thought. That's the first thought I had.
So here's what I'm hearing.
Really, really sad.
Okay, so here's the thing, Mike. I disagree with your premise that an addict can't change on a dime.
Well, of course an addict can change on
a
okay.
Like
so
but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Okay.
Okay, so let me.
There's 2 things. He said some can. If some can, then they can't.
It has to be extreme circumstances, like what you're describing. It would have to be extreme, and life doesn't happen so much every day on extremes. See, that's why I like to go to Jeff, because I have like a controlled. It's almost like I have a controlled trigger when I go to Jeff. And the last time that I was there, and I went and binged 2 weeks ago, when I told him, because I was sending him my food, and I'm like, I'm eating this, I'm eating this, I'm eating this. We had a conversation, and he's like, I knew you were going to go do that. And I said, you and I have to make a commitment that we're going to be sure I'm in the right frame of mind when I leave your place. Because if it's like I'm going to go binge, we have to figure out how that's not going to happen. We have to put some parameters in place and some boundaries in place and some before I leave that place with you.
Okay, so
it's like a controlled trigger almost. Like when I go see my mom now, not before, but when I go see her now, it's a controlled trigger because life happens. And the thing that makes me trigger the most is when I am surprised. When something happens and I am surprised by that, that is a big trigger for me. I figured that out. And so when I have these little controlled places where maybe I'm going to get triggered, but I'm prepared to kind of control that, it seems to help.
Well, here's the thing. You just said you talked to Jeff and you said you feel control, right? And then you said, we have to put some parameters in place because you knew, and he said to you, I knew you were going to do that. Well, first of all, I'm not sure. Now, I may be doing the do as I say, not as I do. But for a coach to tell you, I knew you were going to eat those foods, not the most supportive way of getting those parameters in place. But when you tell him you have to work together to get parameters in place so that you leave in a positive framework, right?
Yeah.
You're giving your power to him. So, Mike, that's
absolutely.
But, okay, so here's the thing.
Because I don't have enough power.
See, and that's just it. That's the addict's illusion, Mike, that they don't have the power. And that's the whole 12-step system. I don't have the power. No, you have the power. You can engage other people in your system, but to tell him, Jeff, that you have to work together to get these parameters in place so you leave in a better frame of mind, and not to say, Jeff, it's not working. I need to make better parameters in my life so that I stick and I say what I'm going to do. Because here's Jeff. He doesn't care what you do or not do. You're going to do what you're going to do. I'm not saying he doesn't care and love you, but he makes money the longer that you don't do what you say you're going to do. Now, I don't know if that's a part of it or not. It's a big part of the whole, outwork or working out community. But
food and money.
Yeah, but I'm not saying he doesn't have a connection with you, and of course he would like to see you thinner and not binging. I mean, everybody who knows you would like to see that. What I know it'll never happen. It could happen on a dime, or it could happen after 20 more years, Mike. I don't know, because I've known this woman for many, many years. But I will say this. When she comes into her own power and she's no longer afraid of it, that is when she's going to stop binging.
Yeah, but the dime is after decades of self-searching, and when you see what you're describing, the dime.
I know that. Yeah, I'm not saying it happened overnight for her, but the need for the dopamine didn't happen overnight either. If you're just blaming it all on dopamine, which I don't think you can. There's a lot more to it than that.
There's a lot more to it. And I just listened to a great podcast with Florence Christopher and Bitten Johnson. And they talked about the extensiveness of eating disorders and how it's so much different than alcohol because of it hitting all the different receptors and there's 3 or 4 different processes in the body that food is going to hit, that food addiction is going to be dealing with, as opposed to just alcohol. So it's a very difficult addiction to deal with. But I understand the words. I understand what you mean, Karen, about using those words, like the word addiction, and how that doesn't sit very well with you.
It separates you from everything. It's a label for you to be different. And that is the ego. You said something earlier. I'm pleased with my eating results. Okay, here's the thing. If you're a carnivore, and that means you eat only meat-based products, or you could be a vegan. Don't eat meat products. And if you eat something that's not one of those things, why do you have to be pleased or not pleased with it? It is what it is. You've created
just the circumstance.
You've created the story, you've created the completion of the story, and you become judge and jury of the story. Just be with what is and decide what works for you.
I agree. I think that's an easier way.
And I'm saying if checking in with Jeff doesn't work for you, don't do it. And you don't know you have to look at what works for you, as in what works for me. I don't want to binge. If you don't mind, if you like all those other details and don't mind binging every so often, then it works for you. Or if you're making up a whole story and that's why you think you binge, but it really isn't, that's also something, more information for you. All right, Mike, undo the damage. 3 minutes.
Well, I mean, I genuinely believe it's a fundamental disagreement of the, I'm not a big fan of the term powerlessness or the use of powerlessness in addiction recovery in the 12-step stuff. That is mostly a spiritual kind of give it to God kind of thing, construct. But I'm also equally not a fan of this. You can change. You have the wherewithal. There is a happy medium somewhere in between. And that happy medium is true recovery, true long-term peace, where, you delve into the reasons you did it, the traumas, and you figure it out, and you heal yourself from that, and you stop going to the triggers. The triggers are an important part. You did uncover something very powerful in the Jeff visit, which didn't occur to me, but it does make sense. There's parts of it. I don't know what parts, and we need to spend a little more time digging into it. But the idea that I think that you have a fundamental difference in opinion in that you believe that anyone can do anything with just making that decision, So yeah, I think that it's not, there's some depth that's missing there, some depth of understanding that's missing, that kind of thing can happen that quickly, or that everyone is capable at where they are to make those decisions and then to change on that dime.
I think what that is, Mike, is that's the power of pain.
And maybe the power of now.
Well, that's exactly it. When the pain that you're experiencing now, right? I used Cammy's child as the example, but that's not enough for Cammy. Okay, here's the good one, Cammy. We know for a certainty that the carnivore diet will heal your body. and it will remove all autoimmune and disease from you. Okay? All you've got to do is eat the carnivore diet. But by the way, today you're being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And the only thing that you can do is just not eat sugar again. And when you're ready to say, oh, well, that's a good enough response. Because I went through that, right? I watched somebody get stage 4 cancer and die 9 weeks later. Now, would it have been any different? Could he have gone carnivore and lived longer than 9 weeks? Don't know. Could he have gone through what he did for 4 weeks and changed? Don't know. But what I'm saying is, when somebody hears the news that says this behavior is no longer serving you, that's when you can change immediately.
Well, what you keep proffering is the idea that there is some way that you can manipulate your mind to do this in some circumstance. It's very similar to a bottom. What you're describing is a bottom, which I'm also not a huge believer in. Okay? I mean, I think it works for some people, but I don't think that it's required, right? It's not a required need for change. You do not have to, end up in the basement from the elevator crashing and crawl up bloody. And, you can just push the button at the first floor and get out, which it sounds like I'm agreeing with you, but I'm not, because you're not going to manufacture from an addict this reason, right? I don't care if it's cancer or death of a child. You're not going to manufacture it, because you're asking yourself, or you're asking her to manufacture it mentally right now, today, without the biochemical repair and the trauma healing part. You're asking her to manufacture the bottom. You're asking her to manufacture the reason egoically, so that she doesn't want to go back. That she wants to change. And that's, in my experience, doesn't work.
All right. So, Mike, consider this. Every one of the people that you see who have changed through the system that you're talking about, they've all done it on a dime.
No, they've all done it after decades of pain and fear and worry.
All of them decades?
Yeah,
I would disagree. I would
it's
say
all semantics. It's all semantics. No, it takes time. It takes time to get to your bottom, or to turn on a dime, or to completely surrender to God.
But see, Cammy,
That
it
takes
doesn't,
time.
because
It takes pain.
it takes pain. That's what it is. And see, Mike, what you're talking about is, you're talking about a system that puts people through the pain and through the trauma, and you say it's healing. But what I'm saying is, you can jump the line. You can jump the line when.
I know you believe that.
You know what? Because
people
do you know how I know it's true? Because I've seen probably as many people jump the line as you've seen do it your way. Because jump the line is when there's so much pain, and that's what your people are going through. They finally get through the pain, and they say, oh, there's a different side to this. And when people get the diagnosis, and I'll tell you, so when you get your stage 4 diagnosis, or when your loved one gets their stage 4 diagnosis, you'll totally understand what I'm saying. Because all of a sudden, there's a pain to life that looks so different than all the bullshit little dopamine things that you're going after. It's different. It's just, I don't have time for that. That's the thing. I don't have time for that. It's got to be now. And that's the power of now. Your people are going through the same thing, the power of now. It's just that they get to now differently.
So here's the difference. I have hundreds, likely approaching thousands, but hundreds that I know personally, who have come from the system that you're describing, and from the mentors that you're describing, and the processes that you're describing, who have failed on that system and have succeeded on ours, simply because they couldn't hold the ego change process that you're describing. They couldn't keep it up, right? Because they didn't truly heal. And that's the difference. And I don't, I understand why you believe it, and I understand why people are attracted to it, but I have lived it with hundreds of people one-on-one who have come from Brain Over Binge or Dr. Glenn or Rational Recovery, and who today, it didn't work. It worked for a while. It does work for a while. Okay. because you can muscle anything for a while, but it falls in line with the same statistics that 95% of all people who lose any amount of weight gain it all back in the first year because they don't truly heal.
I'm telling you though, it's not about muscling. It's about transformation. It's about your brain, your soul, your whatever, is no longer looking at life through the same lens it did the day before. You call it healing, I would call it healing as well. You just think that it has to
That's
take
what
a
I
long
was going to
time.
say.
It doesn't have to take a long time, but not everybody gets the same opportunity to get to it. The long term works for you, right? Because you're dealing with people who have time. I've seen it work on a dime because the people don't have time.
That's why I think you
Nobody
guys
has-
are both saying that
Nobody has time.
you can get to the same thing.
Look, and again, there are success stories on what you're describing, and I can't deny it, that it does work. But there's also a term called dry drunk. There's also a term or a behavior process that they may have arrested the one thing that at that time was bothering them, whatever it is, gambling, alcohol, whatever. But at the end of the day, their behavior hasn't changed because their inner world hasn't changed. Their life hasn't, their understanding of why they did what they did hasn't changed. And they haven't delved into this, the addiction transfer stuff, which is, they just substituted something else and you didn't see it. And maybe they substituted running or work and got positive strokes for it and societally positive strokes for it, but still not well. And so, it's not again, the appearance of the not drinking or the not binging may have happened, but I can guarantee if you dig deeper, and I've lived it. I mean, I've had people come to me, and then when I get digging into it, I come to find out that they're running 100 miles a week, or their exercise addiction or their workaholism or whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough subject, and it's one that is not debated enough, to be honest with you, or not talked about enough. And I think people need to be able to, how should I say, separate or suss out the two methods or the two belief systems, because it might work for some people, but I've seen it in my experience. And I don't like this phrase, but it's the best one I can come up with. True addicts, it doesn't work. Not long term.
All right.
All right.
I will say this, Mike and I both say, if you could get over, find the pain or find a way to transcend the pain, right?
Yes, and it doesn't matter either way you can get to it. Looking at the outside from the two different ways, I think it's possible to maybe do it on a dime, but not to do some things in life on a dime. Like when I decided I was going to be a doctor, that was on a dime decision. And I remember being in the airplane and the exact moment I decided that. And then it was just 8 years getting there. But the addiction piece, the trying to get off of unhealthy coping mechanisms for me is a very different beast for me, especially
But see,
with food.
Cammy, Mike and I would both disagree with you regarding that comment because we both know that it was years of struggle that you had with money and feelings of accomplishment that created in you the thought that said, I'll become a doctor.
I see what you're saying.
Right.
Prior
Right.
to that, there was a lot of pain.
Yes,
Pain
there was
involved.
not just a dime that said, I'll be a doctor. Your brain was fomenting that, and it finally concluded,
Gotcha.
doctor.
Gotcha.
Well, look, my meeting got canceled, so if you want to continue, I'm fine. But it's one of my thought issues, or one of the things that, and I think that, Dr. Glenn became a friend, and we never really, we talked about marketing. We never really talked about this, and I'd love to get him on and talk with him someday. But it's, if you were to read his stuff, it would be exactly what you're describing. He sets up a pig. So the alter ego that is available to change on a dime, he calls a pig. And when the pig squeals, it's looking for slop, which is ultra processed carbohydrates, or whatever you decide. And again, if you look at the book, and I'm not talking out of school. I know this is going to be out in the wild, and I'm not criticizing, but it's like the
I'm
the
going to
book
stop us,
has.
okay?
All
Is
right.
that okay, Cammy? Just so we can top this?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
All right, everybody. We're going to finish online and get back to another discussion with Mike Collins, Sugar Free Man, shortly.